coming all the way from Singapore. David and I had to do a little coordinating on our schedules as I'm in California. But we're both coming to New York City. We're going to be with all of you in Times Square, New York, June 20th through the 23rd. And Dave will be there representing the Klaytn Foundation. And so, David, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to folks that may not know who you are and tell us a bit about the Klaytn Foundation. Then we'll jump in, and I can't wait to learn some things from you.
That's great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate this, and good to be here. So my name's David Shin. I'm based in Singapore, as you mentioned. I am originally from Canada, Korean heritage, born and raised in Canada. Left Canada about 20 years ago. I was an investment banker, heading up sales for equity derivative businesses for various different large American and European banks. I found in 2012, while I was based in Hong Kong at the time, working for Barclays, I found Bitcoin, fell down the rabbit's hole really hard, and jumped into getting into ASIC mining. I was one of the first ASIC miners. ASIC mining was really sort of a means to an end, because unless you were willing to continually contribute capital to the hardware, it got very expensive to keep up with the race. So I pulled out shortly within a year of mining, sold the equipment that we had. We had about 275 terahashes worth of equipment, and moved on to looking at Ripple and starting my one and only startup that I ever tried doing, which was called Paywise. Paywise got a lot of attention from Ripple at the time in 2013. Chris Larson and the team, Gary Kreeman, who is the founder of Match.com, who sold it for millions. He was involved with Ripple in the early days. He and Chris asked me to fly out to San Francisco in 2013 because Paywise was really looking to disrupt Swift, which was not on the radar of Ripple at the time. And so I spent about 3 days in their office walking them through how I thought Ripple could be the backbone or the next generational Swift infrastructure. And so with that, they took a pivot, and the rest is history. They've really been building around that use case. But more importantly, at around that time, I was quite close to a gentleman by the name of Matthew Mellon, who passed away recently in 2018. He was an avid supporter of Bitcoin at the time. I thought Ripple would be something he would be interested in, so I introduced him to Chris. If your audience is interested, they can Google Matthew and Ripple. He really got involved, and before he passed away, was very active in the Ripple community. So fast forward a bit, because this could be a bit long-winded. I decided that in 2019, playing the Bruce Wayne Batman, doing the investment banking during the day and crypto guy at night was not necessarily something I wanted to sustain. So I retired from banking in 2019, went full-time into crypto, gave my wife and kids a bit of brain damage, taking Bitcoin Cash as my salary for about a year, because I ended up deciding to help a good friend, Roger Ver, out in setting up his exchange for his company, Bitcoin.com. So I did that, again, took my salary for about a year in Bitcoin Cash. So really wanted to just full on go into the experience, because that's how much I believed in crypto. And then from there, I moved over to Tezos. Tezos had asked me to help restructure Asia. So I had deconstructed and reconstructed some entities. And what was sort of off the back of that was a new entity that was created out of Singapore called TZAPAC, which I had set up, hired the team, and got that going before I was given a call by one of the co-founders of Korea's largest Web2 company, which is called Kakao. Kakao started as a chat application called Kakao Talk, and it just grew into a mega app, or what we call a super app in Asia, kind of like WeChat. They decided to venture into the blockchain business, launched their own blockchain in 2019 called Klaytn, and then asked me to join last year to help them expand Klaytn globally. So that's my 3-4 minute spiel on who I am and what I'm involved in.
I'm glad you gave the background. Not everybody's familiar with Klaytn. And so can you, are there parallels? Are there, other blockchains that are doing some parallel things where people go, oh, Klaytn's kind of like, or okay, Klaytn's ambition and goals are similar to, or is it very different? Because I mean, not everybody, myself included, have done a deep dive on Klaytn in terms of what the blockchain is and what the big ambitions and goals are.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We are the same but different. And so let me explain that we are the same in terms of our infrastructure to Ethereum. We are what we call ourselves Ethereum equivalent. So we were EVM compatible up until the end of March, and then we went full on equivalence, meaning that whatever the latest upgrade is on Ethereum, on mainnet, that's what we are. So we're like for like in terms of engineering DNA in mainnet. And this was a conscious decision that we decided to take. Really, the footnote to all of this is that we believe Ethereum is at the moment the most superior chain for developers, for liquidity, but also for, more importantly, users. And so we have taken that decision on the technical side. We are, though, however, different in a sense that we've modified our consensus algorithm. We're not a proof of work. We are a proof of stake. And we have a governance council of about 35 governance council members that validate our network. So in that regard, we are a little bit like what Libra was set up to do with their governance council member. We are like Hedera Hashgraph in terms of how they're set up as well. And so we're a little bit different in that regard, but for the average builder, the average user, there's a lot of similarities with Ethereum. I would say if we had a key market differentiator to highlight, it would be the fact that we have taken a very conscious decision as of Q3 of last year to put our focus and our resources into the metaverse, as well as GameFi and the creator economy. In terms of NFTs, we have a strong view that static NFTs and PFPs are really not the end game. And so we constantly look for what the emerging evolution of the NFT market space looks like. We've determined, and I would say more the short to medium term, that NFTs will evolve into being assets that sit within virtual persistent environments like games or metaverses, and that they will be a driver in economic activity in these environments. So that's a little bit different than sort of a BAYC or a PFP of sorts that people hold in their wallet. We see more functionality coming for NFTs.
So with Klaytn being an open source public blockchain, you mentioned some that have some similarities, but your focus is on the metaverse. So how much of that overlaps with the gaming community as a whole? Do you see the metaverse and gamers as one thing, or gamers by and large will merge into the metaverse? Help me understand your personal and the corporate perspective of how you see yourself as a blockchain serving the broad metaverse and the more specific gaming community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So gaming has different threads, I would say. You could have, open world games, you could have RPG games, there's all different kinds of threads. You could also have games that are linked to a metaverse. In a particular case that maybe I can throw as an example, the metaverse to us, I think this is probably actually a better way to describe it. The metaverse to us, we look at it as a wrapper. We see it as sort of again, a virtual persistent wrapper that's open 24/7, 365 days a year. And within that wrapper, we see gaming as one core engine. And then we see entertainment as another engine. And then we see enterprise use cases as a third engine. And there are many more, but those are the three that we prioritize. So gaming is almost a subset. And within gaming, you have different threads, as I mentioned. So you could have, in the case of Fortnite, you could be playing a game, but you could also be attending, a concert. And we've seen that happen. Roblox is the same thing. And so these open world games can facilitate entertainment. And so that's why we don't try and segregate the metaverse from gaming in a very strict way. We actually think we look at it more like a Venn diagram, where we see components that overlap. And what we do then is we look at the overlap and we say, what happens in that overlap? And then ties back to what I was saying earlier with functional NFTs. We think that functionality in NFTs will be the driving value that allows for the integration of blockchains into these different environments. And so by adding tokenomics into a metaverse, really you're creating GDP. And I think by creating this persistent GDP, you're creating a lot of opportunities to increase value across the various different users and different service providers of these metaverses and games. And so that's ultimately how we look at it. It's not as simplistic as perhaps how other layer ones or other foundations may look at the metaverse. We tend to focus, as I said, on the Venn diagram and the overlap.
Well, this is intriguing. I don't know that I've talked with other people that have thought through this the way that you do. Your background certainly gives me, a solid expectation that the projects you commit yourself to are going to thrive. Let me ask this question on the general gaming perspective. There's probably over time going to be new games that rise up on your blockchain and established games. If in the next year or two, an established game called Fortnite, if Epic Games comes over and says, hey, we want to put Fortnite, we understand we can't do it right now, but in the next several years, we want to get Fortnite fully functioning, decentralized on the blockchain. We want the skins not just to be no utility, $20 digital assets. We want them to have utility, whatever it is. You have that side. And then you have a well-funded, well thought out, established team, brand new IP, brand new approach. How might your infrastructure bend to the needs of the super established empire of Epic and the potential empire of a new team that's bringing something to market?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's really, really interesting. We pay attention to both, and we're currently doing that today. So whatever answer I give you is real time happening in our ecosystem. We are the only blockchain that has live on mainnet some of the biggest AAA gaming studios building games. So one example is a Korean game company called We Made. They're a listed game company. Another game company is Netmarble. They're actually quite huge globally, but Korea-based. And we have several others coming on board, including non-Korean large AAA game studios who are building games on our chain. So what we try and do is balance that with new games and bringing on, because the newer games, what they do, Ian, is they tend to look at video gaming models a little bit differently. They turn them upside down, whether it's with play to earn or other more gamified applications like move to earn. And so we think it's quite important that we continue to push the envelope and bring these emerging and evolving models onto our chain. But I think what creates value is bringing the larger gaming studios and creating a conversion of Web2 developers in the traditional gaming space and Web2 users and investors into Web3. If we had a mission statement at Klaytn, it's to do that. Because in doing that, Ian, what we're doing is creating much more utility value on chain and moving away from a lot of the speculative value, which has been sort of permeating through the various different layer ones for the last 6 to 8 years. And so we want to create sustainability regardless of whether there's a crypto winter or not. If you have good games and you've been able to convert traditional users onto the chain, then you can weather any storm. And that's how we see it.
That makes sense. Okay. So what do you think about games that are currently in market that are not at the caliber of what people are used to playing, the AAA games. We'll take a great one like Axie Infinity. Not a super compelling game to play, but it's play to earn, and so it's found its place. And now some AAA level games are starting to either become blockchain games, or there's the resources necessary for the new ones to become that caliber. What are your thoughts on that? How important is the experience the user has, and does it need to feel standard across a blockchain like Klaytn Foundations? Or should there be lots of room on an open source public blockchain for games of every different type, the most boring games and the most thrilling games, and games where you don't earn anything, but there's still a use for playing in a decentralized environment, or games where you do play to earn? Like, give me an idea of diversity, and maybe we can wrap the conversation there. The diversity of gaming in the metaverse, where it's at, and maybe where you'd like to see it be over time.
Yeah, the diversity at the present moment isn't necessarily there. I think we're obviously in the genesis phase of a lot of the GameFi building that's happening, but we like the overall trend of where it's moving so far. We really do need the diversity. I think it's important to have the grassroots gaming projects or startups continue to push the envelope in different models that get presented. This is where innovation happens at the most grassroots level of game development. I don't think the larger companies, the AAA studios, or even the medium-sized studios, are necessarily positioned to want to take the risk, the brand risk, losing their current user base in experimenting in these models. So the diversity is something we promote and we like. What we think will happen is there will be some sort of convergence at some point down the line, let's call it 2 to 3 years, where there will be proven models, right? I think we're still trying to see if play to earn is a proven model. It's looking like there's a lot of interest. And quite frankly, the valuations are saying that it is legit. So, we'll be constantly continuing to watch that space. But we also think that it will evolve into other models like compete to earn, right? So the guild aspect of all of this is sort of the X factor, right, in driving the gaming demand and how the games evolve. And so I think as guilds grow, you're going to see games evolve in a different way and models shift as well. And so from our perspective, what we've done to pre-position to that is we have signed on some of the biggest esports teams in the world. And we are working closely with them on various different facets. But one of the facets is around developing a guild strategy that they can bring to the table and play some of the Klaytn games. And why we want to do that is we think that the guild ecosystem is still a little bit underdeveloped, and that professional management and professional operations from the esports side, if they gain interest and come in, we think the guild aspect of the ecosystem can go to another level, and therefore the games would then evolve. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, we like diversity. We want to continue to invest and see diversity from grassroots all the way up to the AAA gaming studios. But we're also in between all that, having a close eye on how the guild model is evolving in all of this. And we're trying to contribute with our own ideas of bringing some of these large esports teams to blockchain.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop. I think I could ask you another 50 questions. I find your answers to be thoughtful and a bit different than a lot of the conversations I've had. Really grateful to have you be a part of NFT.NYC this year, June. I know you don't do a lot of traveling for events, so we feel fortunate that you're jumping in to represent both the Klaytn Foundation and the gaming community. So for anybody that's watching our conversation right now, thank you for your attention. I hope you make it to NFT.NYC in Times Square, New York, June 20th through the 23rd. And you should know what David's going to be speaking about there is blockchain and the future of gaming within the metaverse. I think it's going to be a fantastic panel. I believe there's going to be a lot of organizations, creators, communities, everybody's going to be touching gaming and the metaverse inside the NFT community, if not now, in the near future. So, David, it's established, trustworthy, consistent leaders like yourself and your network that allow some of the hurdles and the bumps in the road, which can be painful, to be a little less frightening, a little less anxiety producing. So I think the whole industry is grateful for your role at Klaytn and for your continued work in not just what you build, but the way you engage with things like taking Bitcoin Cash as a salary and setting the tone for the way things could and maybe should be done. So, David, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Glad you joined me.
Thanks for having me.